Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our host economic developer, Tracy Verrier, who has a unique position. As Jack Bisgrove, who a number of years ago worked with local officials. And I was involved, as Dan was and others, to establish a blueprint that combined, as an idea, a concept of the chamber and economic development, the promotion as well as economic development. Tracy Verrier is the head of that combined chamber economic development arm in Cayuga County, and Tracy will be moderating our first panel. Tracy Verrier.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today for this exciting topic around economic development in the Finger Lakes area. I'm really honored to have this summit being held here in Cayuga County, the eastern boundary of the Locate Finger Lakes region. Looking at the beautiful Owasco Lake, I'm a little jealous because I have to look this way and you all get to stare behind me at the lake. But we're really happy to be here today. Locate Finger Lakes is focused on an area that touches 3 separate Regional Economic Development Council regions. So these are the regions that focus on economic development efforts from the state level. Today we have 3 very experienced folks from ESD. And we're really lucky to be able to access all of the information and experience and expertise of these 3 individuals, as well as the 3 ESD offices in the 3 Red Sea areas. We are going to start speaking with our panelists. As a little bit of background, Empire State Development, for those that aren't familiar, is the primary economic development agency for the state of New York. They handle a lot of the funding for economic development in the state, including some of the tourism dollars and the big ESD grants you see coming up, being announced in December. Keep your fingers crossed. We've got some good projects in there. So I'm going to turn it over to the panel here and just ask you to maybe give a little bit of information about your background and give us an example of a project that you've worked on in your respective region, how it has impacted economic development in that region. We'll start with you, Jim.
Okay,
You're closest.
thanks. As Tracy said, and also Tracy's a key asset to this region, and she is a member of the Regional Council, so she's a key component and a strong advocate for this county for sure. I've been doing this, as I said, for like 25 years now. Started up through, like just managing economic development loan funds, and then became an IDA director, and now I'm a regional director for Central New York. We're a 5-county region: Onondaga, Madison, Oswego, Cortland, and Cayuga. One of the keys, I think, I'm sure these guys will reiterate, is when putting a deal together, it takes a lot of people, a lot of moving parts. They don't always happen as fast as you'd like them to, but the key is to have key partners, both at the local level as well as the state. One of the recent projects that we've done here in Cayuga County was Cayuga Milk Ingredients, which I worked with Kevin Ellis and his team. Probably took us 3 to 4 years to actually get that project from the first inception to actually happening. The county and IDA was key because they had their industrial park, so they long ago had started the infrastructure that's required for those types of things. They also provided incentives with tax reduction, pilot structure. We, as the state, through the Regional Economic Development Councils, was able to provide some grant funding to assist that. That's a key component to future agriculture, because it's taking liquefied milk and turning it into a powder, which is then exported around the world, especially to third world countries and things like that. So, it's a key. They've been growing, and they're going to continue to grow. And so I think, that locally was one of the projects that we worked on.
Perfect. So again, Greg Albert with Finger Lakes Regional Empire State Development. My background's on the economic development planning side, so I have a background in urban and regional planning. Got my master's at the University of Buffalo, and that segued into my career initially in Lorain County, Ohio, doing community development block grants. Then I worked in the Genesee Finger Lakes region with the Regional Planning Council, doing economic development planning with the Federal Economic Development District. So learning all the different partners, working with all the counties, identifying the key economic development projects. And that background led me with Empire State Development. I've been there since January now, really taking that to the next level and working with all the same partners to advance some of the economic development projects that are critical for our 9-county region. And our region we go as west to Genesee County, so we're Genesee, Livingston, Monroe, Ontario, Orleans, Seneca, Wayne, Wyoming, and Yates. So on the eastern portion of the Finger Lakes, I'll line up with the Locate Finger Lakes region. One of the projects I want to highlight is Cherry Bundy. They worked with Ontario County and the Cornell Ag Tech Park, and it really highlights a lot of the different aspects that we work with our partners initially, doing the startup component, getting that company rising, growing as they develop their cherry juice, and really launching their jobs and their growth. But then we get to that next problem of they're at capacity in the space, they're looking at other regions, they're looking at other states, how can we help save those jobs, get them to grow in New York State? And that's really where our partnerships come in, where Ontario County can reach out to Empire State Development, highlight the need, we can reach out to the business, highlight some of our programs, and really identify what economic development incentives we can offer the company to make it financially feasible for them to grow in New York State and the Finger Lakes region. And we were successful with them identifying a building, getting them into that space, and then at the same time that opened up additional space at the Ag Tech Park for new companies to come in and grow and really repeat that cycle. And that's really what we're trying to identify is different economic development initiatives that we can advance to get companies to grow within the area and then go from a startup to a growing, viable business.
Joe Roman, as was mentioned earlier, with the Southern Tier Regional Office. My career started out in real estate at Robert Cohn Associates in Albany. From there, I did economic development for about 5 years or so for Tioga County, New York. That's Owego and Waverly. And then I have, actually it's more than 20 years now at Empire State Development, so I've been here for quite a long time. Who does that, Jim? So I don't know. So the Southern Tier 8-county region, starting with Delaware County, all the way to our East Delaware, Delhi Deposit. You slide over to Shenango County, you have Greene and Norwich. Slide down to Broome County, center of population there is Binghamton. You also have Endicott and Johnson City as major population centers. You move up northern to Tompkins County, major population center in Tompkins County is the city of Ithaca. Slide down to Tioga County, as I just mentioned, population centers Waverly and Owego. Slide up north again to Judy's home territory, Watkins, Glen, and dare I forget Montour Falls as major population centers. And then the farther west we go, we have Chemung County, City of Elmira, and Horseheads. And then Steuben County, which would be Hornell. You don't want to ever forget Hornell. I don't know if Jim Griffin's in the room. And then also a major population center would be Corning. I started under the first Cuomo administration, so I've seen a lot of different things in economic development through the years. As both these gentlemen had attested to, we've done a lot of great projects, especially under this administration. I have in my experience, I have never seen so many economic development projects or so many economic development dollars committed to funding these projects than under this administration. And that's not a sales thing, that is just a fact based on my experience. The project I want to highlight, there's a few I was going to highlight, but I'll make sure I keep it short because I can talk. I think that one of the good projects we recently done was the Kraft Foods project. That's in Steuben County. Kraft Foods wanted to sell their local facility. Anytime you're dealing with a specialty facility like that uses dairy product to make cheese, it's a specialty facility that's hard to market. It's hard to get another end user in there, especially when Kraft wants a non-compete from a new company coming in. So we worked very hard on that particular deal, and happy to report, as you may have seen in the papers, we did get Upstate Niagara to come in there and manage that facility. They'll retain not all of the jobs, but they're retaining some of the jobs at 150. The other thing, as you know, with a cooperative, we're preserving a lot of the families and the family farms for their dairy. So that's a huge aspect when you do these particular projects. The project cost for that one was about $25 million. Our incentive on this one was about $10 million. It was a special negotiation and a special project to try to retain that facility. And they will, I think annually the production there is about 1.2 million pounds of milk will be produced there annually. So it's a pretty large project, and we're pretty happy that we're able to keep that facility open in the southern tier. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. So every year, each region does a progress report. And starting back at the beginning of the Economic Development Councils, each region created a strategic plan. So each region revisits its strategic initiatives every year. So I was hoping each of you might be able to point to a strategic initiative in the region that affects Finger Lakes counties and is either in the works or is active at this time for your region. We'll start with Greg this time.
Perfect. So for the Finger Lakes region, we've done essentially two plans because we were fortunate enough to be funded under the Upstate Revitalization Initiative. So our Finger Lakes Forward plan under that program was one of the winning regions. So we were awarded $500 million over 5 years to help initiate some of those strategic initiatives that we highlighted, focused on optics and photonics, next generation manufacturing technology, and then agriculture and food processing. So those being the key sectors, and then the underlying pillars of job creation, job growth, anti-poverty, trying to highlight and solve some of those issues. And then the components that we've led to help address those, looking at workforce development, are partnerships with the colleges and universities. So on the food and ag sector side, we've really worked with Cornell, all the cooperative extensions within our region, really highlight some of the projects. And really we've had those discussions, and a lot of what we heard was that the smaller farms, smaller ag sector companies just don't have the funding, don't have the wherewithal to actually initiate some of the projects. Most of the ESD incentives are tailored to higher dollar projects, higher number of jobs for investment. So we put together a couple targeted Finger Lakes initiatives. One is the Growing the Agricultural Industry Now. It's our GAIN RLF fund, and that is small level loans up to $200,000 for farmers, agribusiness, production side, to really get that seed capital for them to help some projects move forward. So that rolling loan fund is out there to assist within our region. And then with that, there's other statewide initiatives that kind of parallel track. The New York State Ag Loan Fund program is out there in the entire state, covering something similar, low interest loans for small farmers. And really we've tried to kind of partner all of that, those smaller programs, with our larger incentive programs that we highlighted before, our grants, our CFA application grants, our Economic Development Fund grants, and then as well as our Excelsior tax credits that really line up with the larger projects. We try to parallel track those with some of the other smaller programs to really help advance that Finger Lakes Forward plan that we have in place.
Give it to me? Oh, I wasn't ready, Jim.
What I'll mention, and I know Judy and Heather's in the room, so with some trepidation, but I will mention, I think one of the more creative programs that the Southern Tier did a few years ago back was the Street Act programs. They were funded by Empire State Development. We had four, three of which were heavily utilized. One was for downtown community revitalization, another was for agriculture, and then a third was for business park development. I'll focus on the agriculture program, which was called the Rural Initiative. As was mentioned by my counterpart, ESD is good at funding typically larger projects. Many of you in the room probably know that. So if we're dealing with a forestry products company such as a sawmill, or as I mentioned before, a large dairy producer, we can come in and offer some good incentives to those type of projects. But when it comes to the local farmer, the small farmer, ESD does not always have a lot available. This program filled that gap, and what it would do is it would offer low-cost loan financing for these particular businesses. That loan was at 1%. And it could finance up to 80% of the project. Is it still 82 or to go up to 90? I remember it was a significant chunk. And the program is still in existence, it's still operational, although it is now revolving and is no longer funded by Empire State Development. But that initiative, in my opinion, was a wonderful opportunity to help these local farmers. We did have a debate early on under both community and rural as to whether grants would be the way to go or loans. Many argue that grants are the only way that these projects would work. Obviously we did it as a loan program under both of those, and it has been extremely successful. So the 1% financing, the 1% gap financing was extremely helpful. And now the best thing of all, the fact that we did that and did it as loans, now those programs are evolving and remaining in the southern tier and will be here long after I'm gone from Empire State Development, and Judy will be here for a long time. So we're real happy about the revolving.
Okay. Jim?
So Central New York, its initial strategy when it started its initial strategic plan focused on three key components. One was the focus on exporting initiatives, so to help companies be able to expand their markets through exporting. We also focused on our core competencies, you know, what we do well here, and wanted to make sure that we didn't forget that. Agriculture is certainly a key component of that. And then rebuilding our urban cores. So we've done a lot of investments in our cities, in smaller villages. So it's just not the big cities, but it's all across the board. And then we also were fortunate enough to be a upstate revitalization initiative winner as well. And we had 6 additional kind of focus areas on that. One is controlled agriculture, so trying again to utilize our agricultural assets and you know, put it in, try to extend the growing season, create multiple turns, as well as develop aseptic packaging so that then our products can be sold around the world. So that's one of our key focuses. And the other is our unmanned aerial initiative. We have, building on the strengths of a lot of our core companies here, Saab, Census, SRC, Lockheed Martin, that are all in the radar sensing, you know, defense industry. So we've been advancing a lot of this unmanned initiatives through the Defense Department, and now as we're trying to commercialize that initiative, you know, we're focusing on growing that and commercializing it. A couple of key focuses of technology that we're doing with that is, one is we're working with SUNY ESF to use drones to help identify early on harmful algae bloom problems so that they can get out there. Currently, right now, basically, DEC people, you know, have to go out in boats and drive around the lake looking for it. We can use drone technology, which will hover and identify those blooms much earlier, which allows us to try and you know, mitigate that. Another unique technology that we're focusing on is, apparently if you put a sonic boom type thing into the water, that'll kill the algae bloom. So right now we're working at that technology with SUNY ESF about, like that, you know, putting those types of sensors on the drones, put them into the water, and try and dispense the blooms that way. Another initiative we did was with pollinating crops. There's a bee shortage, so a lot of the pollination is getting hampered by that. This year we did a test at Beacon Skiff Apple Orchards where we used drones to pollinate the apple trees early in the season so that to try to help again mitigate some of the risks with using bees to pollinate. So those are some of the things we've been working on here.
Thank you. And the last question I have for you is around really taking advantage of the fact that we can access all three of you and all three of the regions. So do any of you have any comments on how the regions can work together and how you worked together in the past or are planning to work together in the future?
Jim, we'll let you take that as the most senior person here.
We're very competitive at Empire State. So I worry about Central New York. No, we're obviously being a state agency. What's good in another region is good for us as well. We've actually through the drone initiative, we've worked with Mohawk Valley region, utilizing assets there as well as here. And we're currently entering into a program to develop a agricultural business competition with the three regions here to, again, help to focus and grow the industries here. I mean, agriculture is such an important part of all three of our regions. So, we try to work together as best we can. If we don't have an asset that we know that a company's looking for, but we know one of these other regions do, we certainly want to encourage and pass that along, because as I said, an investment in the state is ultimately what our goal really should be.
I echo those comments, but I also wanted to emphasize too that being a state agency, we have access to even other state agencies beyond Empire State Development. Having that resource, Department of Labor, NYSERDA, Department of State, some of their initiatives, there's a lot of overlap between organizations and their impact on economic development. Another thing that we've done at ESD is really highlight some key industry experts, which really represent that industry throughout the state. So if we know we have a key agricultural projects in the Finger Lakes region, I can reach out to Jane Thielen, the agricultural industry expert, get her opinion, her thoughts. She may know another region that's had something similar, help us work that deal through. It's been really helpful. Just having that statewide partnership and everyone willing to pick up the phone, make the calls necessary to advance. Any other thoughts?
I have no thoughts.
Just very quickly, I'll say the interlink between the regions is extremely important. The regions, for example, if we take labor force, as you know, labor force won't know boundaries, does not know boundaries. So we will share labor force amongst the regions. So what happens in the bordering regions, especially for the southern tier, is extremely important. I remember years ago when I was much younger in this business, some of my colleagues were reaching out to development folks in Pennsylvania, and I was of the opinion, why on earth would we reach out to economic development folks in Pennsylvania? Well, as it turned out, for this particular project we were working on, as some border counties, Pennsylvania provided about 40 to 50%, or was going to provide about 40 to 50% of the labor force for that particular project. So again, although there's more boundaries and there's regions, I just think it's important we always recognize that there's lots of things we share, and we do try to work together as much as we possibly can, especially when the project's warranted.
You summed that up very nicely. Thank you. You just made my job very easy.
Sorry.
So, Mike, do you want time for maybe one or two questions? Does anybody have a burning question for these fantastic panelists?
All questions go to Jim.
Right.
The gentleman on the right, what was an example of one of the ag projects that you worked with?
So Ray asked about an example of one of the ag projects helped.
Through the Street Act program?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, there's so many. Judy, can you think any off the top of your head?
Several wineries.
Yeah.
They went cheese with the cheese plants and
Yeah, there's been I do know with the you had to ask that question. I do know with the ag program and also the community program. We actually on the community program that ran out of money first, but the ag program has been chugging along with a lot of projects. Trying to think, I know we've done so many. I'm trying to think of a recent one we did. I know we've done in Schuyler County, as you just mentioned. I know we've done a bunch of wineries for sure. But that's not the only thing we've been limited to. We've done it for smaller wood manufacturers as well. And even, I know we've done it for some growers. So we had, working with Jamie Johnson in Steuben County, we had, with the new beverage craft industry that's taking off, we provided some incentive, some of that money for hops growers. Basically, I remember I went out for the door, and it's basically a field. Gentleman's going to prepare hops there, grow them, and then transport them to be processed. So I think it covers a pretty big gamut. And the best thing I saw for those local farmers is that a lot of times they did not have the ability to get bank financing for some of these projects. Therefore, we come in and can offer 80% of that project cost was significant.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much, guys. I'm actually going to hand the microphone back to Senator Mazzolio for the last question. But before I do that, I wanted to personally thank you for being here today and sharing some of what you have up there in your brains for us to take home and work with. I know there's a lot more up there, but we'll get back to that at another summit. So thank you so much, and I will now hand it back over to the summit.
Thank you, Tracy, very much. And I don't know if this will be the last question or not, but first and foremost, we want to thank you gentlemen for being here today. That it is important and many of you traveled a long distance. We appreciate that. One of the intergovernmental cooperations, interregional cooperations that we'd like you to focus on is agribusiness. And that later today, Jan Nyrop, head of Cornell Agritech, and Bill Strasberg, Vice President of Wegmans, will be talking about the Center of Excellence for Food and Agriculture, something that transcends your three regions. It will be centered in the Finger Lakes region. However, the central and southern tier will play a major role there. And not to speak to a particular project, but Bill Strasberg has been one of the prime movers of the New York Food and Agriculture competition. Maybe you could talk a little about agriculture and your role, as you see it, potentially in the Center of Excellence for Food and Agriculture, and also this competition not to explain it now, but I know you're all aware of it, and I know you're all supporting it in your Regional Economic Development Council. So if you could share those concepts with the audience, it would be deeply appreciated.
I'm glad he goes first.
Yeah, so that's a new initiative that we're starting, working with Cornell and Wegmans and our other regions. Again, agriculture is a key asset and a key industry in our regions and statewide, quite frankly. I think there's a lot of great opportunities that we can start building on as we continue to grow the industries. Doing things like with the Cayuga milk ingredients that supports all of the dairy industries around, and trying to focus on aseptic packaging, which can extend shelf life, and try to focus on controlled environmental agriculture to, again, extend growing seasons. So certainly, I think part of, at least my thought is on this competition is, trying to identify some of the best ideas as we try to advance those types of initiatives, from, around the country and around the world, quite frankly. So I would, think that there's some great opportunities that exist in the agricultural industry, the wineries, the craft beers, along with our traditional agriculture. So, we constantly are trying to support that. Certainly with, say, the craft beverage industry, that's allowed farmers to change crops, to maybe get into hops and barley. We helped Sunoco so that they're going to do a malting house, which then supports the industry. So I think, I think we're all very cognizant of the importance of that and trying to identify projects. Tracy somewhat alluded to it, but we just submitted our progress report for this year, and there's 4 or 5 key agricultural projects in that plan as well. So hopefully we'll be successful.
Perfect. And from the Finger Lakes perspective too, we've had great relationships with Cornell, with Wegmans, and always talking with them to help address some of the agricultural concerns, issues that farms, production sides running into, trying to solve those. And I think the Center of Excellence takes that to another level of really trying to identify those best ideas, solving those problems, and really trying to find what the future of food is going to look like, what challenges we have on the growing crop side, how can we solve those, how can we advance those to be an economic development driver as well. So we're working closely on that as everything launches forward. We'll certainly be involved. We'll keep those conversations going and really working with our businesses right on the ground too. Any agriculture or food side, any challenges they have, we're having those conversations constantly, trying to echo their concerns to higher levels, getting those things addressed, and then hopefully we can advance those within New York State.
What's left to say? I'll just the thing for the southern tier, and I was just talking to Donna about this the other day, is transformative and global. So as we look at some of these technologies and these projects that can potentially come out of this, we're really looking to help. I don't want to say solve, but at least progress some of the issues that we have with the agriculture industry. And I'll leave it at that.
Well, thank you again, and that will conclude the panel. Enjoy the rest of the day, and I hope you all learned a lot.